Good afternoon. Good afternoon,
Hello.
everybody. Hello. Welcome to this second meeting that our school is organizing with the support of JET, which is the Groupement Européen des Écoles de Cinéma et Télévision. That is the European branch of SELECT, as I told you last time, for those who were there. And we are having this meeting in collaboration with Bergamo Film Meeting. It's a festival, it's a local festival, but it's also international, and it has been running for 39 years and has a longer tradition. And the collaboration with the school, with our school, started something like 8 years ago. And with them, we are organizing also 2 programs from the Select Prize that some of the students can appreciate on the site, on the website. The meeting is possible because it's supported by JECT through a project that is the relief funding for Lebanese schools. And we embraced this project with them to give to university and school in Lebanon some help with special meeting and special lessons and master classes. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Federico Pedroni, which is working for, it's a film critic, and is working for Bergamo Film Meeting on this occasion. And of course, Mia Hansen Løve, which is the French director that I'm very pleased to introduce to you. And I hope that you all have seen her films, or at least the one that I sent you. So you can ask your question during the conversation that we're doing, or after, whenever you like. And I think that it's all for the moment. And I can leave the stage to Federico and Mia. Thank you so much. Just a last thing. Mrs. Minnie Ferrara, who is the director of our school, as many of you know, can be here because as an appointment, and wants to greet you all and thank you, Mia and Federico and Bergamo Film Meeting, for this occasion. I'll leave you the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, and I'll try to explain myself in English, and I hope I will do it in a sufficient way. And I know that some of you of the audience have seen at least one movie from Mia, but I hope that they have seen something more on the Bergamo Film Meeting platform or before. I'd like to introduce Mia as one of the most peculiar and interesting directors in world cinema in this last 15 days. It's been, I think it's just 14 years from your first movie. Am I correct? I think so, something like that.
I think it's almost 15 years, yes.
Yeah, it's almost 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was, if I remember well, it was at the Kensen in 2007. So it's 14 years,
Yes,
but you shot it before. So it's about 15 years. It's about
no,
15
I know I shot, all I know is I shot the film when I was 25.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So it's 15 years from now. But I just, when Mia was born in Paris, and she studied philosophy before starting to be a director, and then she had some experience as an actress, but I don't know how much does it last, does it long, and when she decided to, because we're talking to a school of student audience, so I'd like to, if you can tell something about your first steps, because you started so young, because in Italy, 25 movie is incredible.
Well, actually, yes, I started young. You know, yesterday we had this talk and we discussed about the passing of time in my films. And I think when I was in my 20s, I was obsessed with the notion of passing of time. And for some reasons, I felt very old. I was obsessed with the fear of, I don't know, life being too short or something like that. And so yes, I was in a hurry somehow. Um, um, but then I didn't study cinema in a film school. I went to a university and I studied actually German literature, and that, yes, it led me to studying for 1 year German philosophy. That was in my fourth degree in university. But so my study had nothing to do with cinema. But when I was 16 years old, so when I was still in high school, and there was this film of Olivier Assayas, late August, early September, for which they were looking for a for a teenager to play. And I had no experience at all in films. My parents had nothing to do with this world, but I went to the cast. I had no idea what I wanted to do actually with my life, except I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I went there, and I was chosen. And at this moment of my life, I was a very, very melancholic teenager. And the experience of being on a set at the age of 17 really changed my life, because it was as if there was here an opportunity to use my melancholy in order to do something positive with it, something creative. And I think that's the one thing that remains the strongest for me in this experience. Not, of course, being an actress or acting in that film. That was a one-time or two-time experience. I acted only one more time in the film after that. But that experience was very strong, of course, to be in front of the camera, being filmed, being looked at as an actress. But I never, to be honest, I never really felt like an actress. But I think more than that was the experience of the fiction and the power of fiction, and what fiction could bring to my life. And I think so it really started there for me. And after that, I wasn't sure. Of course, I didn't know all of a sudden that I wanted to become a director. It took me some time and even some years to get that conviction, that vocation, that certitude that directing myself was something I could do. But that was so that there was a way to go. But that was the starting point, and from there I started to become a cinephile. I started to write things that were not scripts, but step by step, I went closer and closer to the world of film writing. And when I was 21, something like that, I wrote my first short film, but I had no producers. I knew basically nothing really on the technical side about how to make a film. All I could use was my sensitivity and my sincerity, but I didn't know in terms of technique. I didn't know nothing. So I made this short film with very few money, without producer, with my own money, but it was like one day of shoot. And that was the starting point for me.
And then, because that's a starting point, you were 21. And then how when you decided to do something bigger? So what's the process that has led you to All Is Forgiven, to Appartenir? That is your first movie. That is a movie really, something really strong as a first feature, because it was something for a 25 years old that had nothing before done with the technical properties. Did you arrive to do a movie that is a really?
I think I was never really inspired to write short films, and maybe I was lucky about that, because that let me win some time somehow, because I had one idea, and it was for this one story, but it was an idea that I could only tell with a lot of time. I couldn't tell this story within just a few scenes. It was a story that needed to unfold in some years, so and there was a lot of things that I wanted to, scenes that I wanted to write. So I think it's because I was kind of haunted by this story of my family that wasn't my personal story, but it was connected to my story. It was a story that I wrote with the things I knew and the things that I didn't know about my family. You know, every single family story is made with things that you know, and with holes, with you know, things that people don't talk about, and I was myself. I was made out of all these, you know, the thing of these things that I knew or didn't know, you know, and it also developed my imagination. I had some obsessions, and there was this melancholy that was in my family from generation to another. And somehow at the moment, this story that I was telling about a young man, self-destructive young man who is a drug addict and who destroys his own family and loses contact with his daughter and meets his daughter again 12 years later. So this particular story, at some point, I identified myself to it as if it was defining for who I was. And so from that moment, so I wrote the film until when I was 21 or 22. And from this moment, I gave, that's when I really got the conviction that it was what I wanted to do. And then I gave all my energy and concentration and determination to that film. But I was also very lucky because I met a producer who was a great French producer. His name was Humbert Balzan. He had been producing very films that I felt very connected to, and also he had been an actor in one of Robert Bresson's films that was a film that I had been writing on as a film critic at Les Cahiers du Cinéma, because at the time I was writing a little bit at Les Cahiers. And so I met this producer. He had appreciated my short film very much. He gave it a prize in a film festival, and we started to have this very strong relationship. He wanted to produce my first feature, even if I had done any film school, even if I had very few experience. He trusted me, and so his trust really also helped me a lot finding self-confidence. And then he died after a year. Maybe you know that.
What?
This producer died. He committed suicide, you know, and he inspired my second feature, actually.
Yeah, I was telling that when we were talking about the second one, but I was just want to, you know, stay on this one, because you said something that was really, for me, that as a viewer before than a critic, when I watch your movie, is something that is really interesting. That you said that for your first movie, you were talking something that is not your own story, but a story that you know, that was really near you. And it was interesting for you to tell the story, because of that story, you know something and you don't know something. I think that is a really similar way of your way of filming, because sometimes you just, you know, I as a 25-year-old debut director, treat the viewers like me as an adult people, because you just tell me that I can know something and I can imagine something. I have to imagine something, and so you just, you know, put a step back of the pure linearity of the story to do something that is more emotional. So I would like just some words from you about this creative process and this way of the mise en scène.
Yeah, it's true that I always trusted the viewers, the audience. I often find when I watch films that the way the story is being told is very conventional. That people think they have to explain to you everything, that they have to underline what they mean. You know, that they really take the audience like for as if they were children, or or that you really needed to explain them everything. And it's, of course, it's not the case for all the movies, but you really have this idea of this conventional idea of script writing, where everything has to be very like A plus B, and I think I'm rather the opposite. I think I like things to be not explained. I like scripts to have holes. Because that's how I feel about life. And for me, there is really like two types of cinema. Like one cinema that I also respect, and I can love films of that cinema, but it's a cinema that tries to make films that look like cinema, that tries to create a world where you are in a world of cinema. And that can be, of course, also very exciting. And there is another cinema where the quest is more a quest for a feeling of life, And it's a very different, to me, it's almost metaphysical, the difference. I mean, it's just another quest. It's not, you don't have to say it's good or bad, or that's the good way to do it, or, it's the only way that that's the only thing that's interesting in cinema. I think you have an infinity of possibilities, but the one thing that, for me, gives the meaning to the cinema on a personal level is really this quest for life. And I know it's an illusion. I know that cinema is actually not life exactly, but you can still, I'm interested and passionately interested in trying to create films that transmit a feeling of truth, of truth related to what life is, And I think that quest is my quest, and it determines my writing, it determines my choice of actors, the way I film and the way I edit, and even the way I use the sound and the music in my films. That gives me the note, and that's the thing that I'm, it's the thing that I'm following. It's that train of life somehow.
I think it's really, peculiar from you, and you said something that it's the really heart of your cinema. So the relationship that is not just the same between reality and truth. There are two things that are not the same thing. So I think that is something that is completely truthful. Your movies, even when it's a little less realistic. So I don't think that you search for a realistic version of life, but you see something more intimate, something more profound.
Yes, because it's reality in films is always a reinvention. You have to recreate it. It's never really reality, because you have to, it's actors, you recreate scenes, it's fake. I mean, so anyway, it's an imitation of life. So people would say my films are realistic. If you look at them, I would say on the surface. But I think behind the surface, I think my films are much more about, of course, they deal with reality, but they try to be about what's behind it, with something more invisible. But I use reality as a tool, as a music, as a language that is a way of communicating, but that's not the final destination, I would say.
Then, as you said before, the first person in the movie world that trusted really in you died. So you take this another part of reality, of real life, to do another trip, another voyage with your second movie, that is The Father of My Children. And then again, you start with a story, and then you shift at the middle of the movie to another stories on other characters, and every character has an own path that you try to follow. And it's another time they're trying to create a relation between what's happening and what they really feel, and when they're going. So how do you manage to do, starting from a tragic situation of real life, to do a film that at the end of which you really feel so relieved in the future? Because it's a movie that really hurts you, but at the end, I felt really with with the last shot in the car of the young protagonist way, I see a look at the future that is really full of hope and intimacy.
I think it again, it has to do with what I expect from cinema. I think cinema is telling stories, making films is not for me just a banal, just an occupation, just a work. It's really something that I need in my life. It's vital, I would say. It's an intimate necessity. That's how I see it, and still do after 15 years old. So the question for me is really, what do I want? I'm trying to give my best to the films, but what do I expect the films to give to me? And on the one hand, as I told you, I'm looking for a certain truth, or my feeling of what the truth is, my experience of life, and I'm trying to transmit something about that. But on the other hand, I don't want it to be to bring despair. I couldn't make film that would just bring despair to the audience. And really the question is that I found quite philosophical, actually, and that I feel like it's a question that I work with film after film. The question is, how do I tell the real story? How do I tell the truth without bringing people to despair, to just look at life as if it's only tragic and absurd. And so I think it's really a matter of balance for me between lucidity, transparency on what life is, its cruelty, its tragedies, its violence too, and on the other hand, the light of it too, because there is also light in life. I don't think there is only darkness in life. There is darkness, there is light, and how do at the end you can not, I don't know if I would say bring hope, because that would mean I would really try to force something into the film. I'm not trying to force something into the film, but how can we see the light that exists, and how can this light help us move forward and get over what's tragic in life. So I think it's almost a moral or philosophical position on how do you look at life. I don't want to lie to people. I don't want to pretend that life is easier than it is. So that's crucial for me, to not be betraying that kind of truth. But on the other hand, I would like to look at it in a way where I can see some light, and so it's really a matter of balance and moving back and forth between opposite forces of our lives.
Well, but what you say about cinema has something to do that cinema is to learn something about life. It's something like epistemology. It's easy to say that you study.
I do think philosophy have a lot to do in common. I do think.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to ask you something about how you work, because in the first two movies, the young protagonists are really young, and they really give an incredible performance. So as a newcomer, as a director, how can you started working with people that has no much experience, like the young protagonist of Tu as pardonné et Le Père de mes enfants?
Actually, it's excuse me, it's quite recent for me to work with famous actors, or actors who have a lot of experience. Something that I did in the last film that I shot, and things to come. But before that, all my first films, my 4 first films, I made mostly with unknown actors, or actors, non-professional actors, young people. I love innocence in actors. I really do. I think that's one of the things that makes me enjoy filming the most. I don't like self-consciousness so much. I really enjoy the innocence of kids. That's why I've always loved filming kids, but also the one of young people, of teenagers and young people, or sometimes actors who are actors but who don't have that much experience. I think you work differently with very experienced actors. You can find some innocence in them too, but it's different. You know, it's another way of working. But I think when I started for the first years, I really that was really the one thing that attracted me the most. And also, I think as I was myself not experienced at all, these were my first films. I didn't want to work with somebody who would have been, you know, like a star and would make me like in a relationship where I don't know how to put it. Like I wanted to be light. I wasn't so self-confident. I was kind of shy. I mean, I had some self-confidence, but I was still, you know, technically, as I said, very unexperienced at first, and I learned step by step. But it's the same. Like I started working with a DOP who had not been making a lot of films. I didn't want to be surrounded with like, you know, people who have like so much more experience than me and who basically give me the keys of how to do it, you know. And that's true about the actors as well as about the DOP, as about the editing. Actually, I started with surrounding myself with young people. I mean, I had a very young, they were all my age basically. My editor, my DOP was very young too, and I liked the idea that we are all learning together. But you know, some directors start and they like being, it reassures them, I guess, or makes them feel important or whatever, you know, to be surrounded with, you know, they would take like stars in their film, and or even the DOP are very famous. And so all these people know how to make films, and it makes them feel they will, you know, it's like a shortcut to, you know, how to do it. But I wanted to learn by myself, you know. I didn't want people to give me all the keys of how you make films too fast. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely, because it's really usual thing. It's what you said just now. So maybe even the directors just like to be assured with having people with experience, but most of the time the producers like to have the newcomers that are the directors, to put them people that are just to feel more sure. But I think that's really interesting, and it just goes back to what you're saying before, that you want to do movies to learn something from them when you do it. So it's I think that's one of the reasons. That's why you like to work like that, because it's always a quest for something new. So I think that's really interesting. And then we said we were talking about young people, and the third movie that you directed, it's, in English I think it's Goodbye First Love, in French is Pour Jeunesse, and it's the movie that I'm sure they sent to all the students. So this is the one they surely have seen it. And I was talking about acting, I was really mesmerized by the innocence of Lola Creton in that movie. It was really something amazing. And again, you mix together, you know, a precise moment in life that it's not so precise, because it's precise phase in life of the growing up, about some, telling that about some, you know, exquisite moments chosen during the part of this character. And then again you try to, you know, like choose the details that are most important to make not the story understandable but the character through. So I'd like to, if you talk again about this movie, that is a movie that I really fell in love with.
Thank you. Well, it's probably my most autobiographical movie, actually. Although it's not really, because it's about a young girl who becomes an architect, and I didn't become an architect. I became a filmmaker. So it's not. You see, even when my film looks very autobiographical, it's not really, and it's always a transposition. I mean, a translation of my life through other stories. But it's the one. It was the first of my films where actually the main character really was as close to who I was or to who I thought I was, or my own, personal story. Because my two first feature, even though they were young girls in them, they were not, their story were not my story. I just felt very connected to them. So that film was really the first one that was where I in that film I felt I was more frontal in the way of expressing myself. And it took me actually some time to find the right way to tell the story, because I think I actually was a little bit shy to, especially exactly because of that, because the film was so autobiographical. Actually, there was, I think, a first moment where I wrote the script at maybe before Father of My Children or right after, but I think it was before. And I would tell the story from the point of view of the boy, actually. Which made the film impossible for me to do, because then the boy, he was leaving the young girl to go to South America, and he would travel and then let her go, and etc. And I thought I wanted to tell the story from his point of view, and it took me like 2 years maybe, to come to the conclusion that the only way to tell the story was to be with her and to not be shy of, in a way, like telling from my point of view somehow. But what I mean is that it wasn't so easy, it took me some time and some maturation, to be able to tell that story. And then again, but that's true about maybe all of my films, the decision of telling the story is not something so rational. At some point, it's more like I have these images. I have a notion of a presence, of a certain emotion that has to do with their love story. So yes, I do have some kind of story, but it's very minimal. But what really makes the film become a film for me, before I write it, is not so much the story than the images, like images that become very pregnant, very powerful, very clear in my mind. Like, for instance, at the end of the film, she goes out to the river, and the hat that her boyfriend has given to her long ago, and that she's still wearing, that she's wearing on that last scene. So her hat is taken by the wind. You remember that scene? It's the very last scene of the film, and so it's taken by the wind and then by the river. It goes on the water, and the river takes it, and it's, of course, it's metaphoric, but it's also very concrete. And for instance, that's typically, even before really knowing what the film was about, I had this kind of image in mind. And that's these images that helps me step by step to build the story.
Yeah, that I remember well that scene, because it's a scene that I really love, because I think it's cinematically perfectly constructed, because and that now something that we said yesterday with the audience of Bergamo Film Meeting, but I'd like to turn it back to, because it's important for me, that what you say about it for a student of music. In that last scene, there's a typical use of music, and music partnering with images, with a wonderful song that is The Water by Johnny Flynn and Laura Marling. But it's the way that you use, with not much generosity, the music in your movies, because when you use the music, it has to have a sense, a significance that is really there. And so I'd like, starting from that scene that all the audience should have seen it, because it's the movie they show. I want to tell if you can tell us something about your way of using music in all your movies.
Well, the thing that is defining for me is the fact that I don't work with, until now I have never worked with composers who would, with musicians who would make music specially for the film. I always used pre-existent songs, and I think it's very defining for what I'm looking for in the use of music. For me, music opens the film to another. it relates to what I said before about the fact that my films, I wanted to be connected to real life, to feeling of life. And for the same reason, I never wanted to work with a composer who would have made a music for the film that would kind of be the comment of the film or support the film. I like the idea that the music has its own world, has its own past, its own soul, and that I just make it connect with my film somehow. So that first is one of the particularities of my use of music. And second, it's true that most of the time I use very few tracks actually in my films. So there is a lot of silence in my film. I mean, there is a lot of moments where I think other directors would like to use music, to support the scene or move from one scene to another. And I'm restrained. I mean, I would rather not use music. I enjoy the silence. But then I think when I use the songs, the few songs that I use and that I have chosen with a lot of passion. I mean, most of the songs I use is in my film. There are songs that I've been listening to a lot, and that I really have a strong relationship to. And when I use this song, I think most of the time I use them in a way that you really listen to them because they are part of the action somehow. They are part of the scene. And most of the time, the characters of the scene listen to them too. So they are not like sometimes the music in film. You hear them, but they are here like underneath. Whereas in my films, they are more like in front. They are meant to be looked at almost. So it's a little bit different than a more classical way of using music, I think.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that is a really deep emotional way of using the music in your movies that is completely different for a sentimental way of using it. So it's more deeper. That it's something more deeper and something more concrete. I like the thing that you told me that you just can try to see the music on the screen when you're But we're talking about music, and the next feature that I remind all the listeners, if there's some question or some curiosity to ask Mia, just write it here. I can read it. So I'd like to ask Mia how she arrived for another story that was near to them, because her brother was in the 90s was a DJ, an important DJ in the French music scene, and when she decided to make maybe a more difficult technically movie as Eden, because Eden was a really big movie with a lot of characters, with a lot of locations, with a lot of mass scenes. It was a little bit bigger as a project than the movies that she shot before.
Yeah, so Eden was a little bit of a crazy project, actually. I wrote it because I wanted to make this film about my generation, and I thought if I make a film, I wrote it at a moment where I was asking myself what was defining for my generation, and I realized it was music, and that if I wanted to make the right film about it from my point of view, it should be not on my own youth, but it should be on my brother's youth, because he had been a DJ and he had been involved in the world of electronic music since he was 18 years old. And so he had been going through this whole trip, of electro music that has been very strong, but also sometimes very destructive. And he was really in the middle of that, my brother. And I was there as a witness, but I thought I should really tell his story, because it's really the most relevant way to look at what has been collective, in my generation. After Goodbye First Love, that was a very personal and intimate film about my own story. Hopefully, I was reaching something universal, but the starting point was still very personal. I wanted to look at my generation for a more collective point of view, and my brother, his story made it possible. But yes, the first the first project was 2 films. It was a little bit crazy. It was a very, very expensive, very impossible to do, but that was the excitement also about it. And actually, I had to change producers twice to finally find the right producer who was able to produce that film. And it remains for me as an extraordinary experience in terms of collective experience, in terms of, group of actors, the energy given to you from young people, a group of young actors, the ones who were being in the film, that was something quite unique for me among my films, because that's the only film that I made with such a large group of, of young and enthusiastic actors. And also because, yes, we had to deal with so many club scenes, and there were so many different challenges about the music, how to film all these dance scenes and these musical scenes, and how to use the sound properly, how to get all the musical rights, how to film the crowd, how to get the proper crowd, how to be authentic about the different places. We were shooting in New York, in huge places where we were filming actual parties, but that was really crazy, honestly. But certainly one of my strongest memories of a shooting. I was really exhausted after that.
Yeah, I can believe it, but I say I'm a little bit older of that generation, but I just can remember the club scene of that time, and I think that it was really amazing the way that you can describe that, making us viewers to see the importance of the presence in the movie and a nostalgic way of something that has passed. So it's another we're going back to the whole thing of the passage of time. And I think that Paul, the protagonist of the movie, the main character, is in a way this time is more difficult for him to let him flow from the present to the future. You can feel it that sometimes it's blocked and the time is passing by him. And
Yes.
I think it's a really wonderfully melancholical and nostalgic way, but not sentimental way to see for a time that has been so defining, but is past.
There's something really ironic for me, is that when I wrote Eden, I thought I was really writing my film that was the most, how can I say that upbeat, because it was about music, and music I love, and it was about this extraordinary collective moment in France where all these young DJs became artists and created a new music that was something so strong and powerful. I thought that my film was really the most upbeat, not optimistic, because I know how it ends, and it's quite melancholic at the end, but still, that was for me, my feeling when I was making it, what I was doing was something very, like that, like going up. And when I wrote Things to Come, the film that I wrote at the same time when I was trying to get Eden produced, so my 5th film, that's about a philosophy teacher who gets her husband leaves her, and she has a lot of difficulties in her life. I thought I was making a very harsh, dark film. And at the end, now that it's all over, Things to Come really remains as my most light and happy film. Although the subject is very, the starting point is dark, but at the end, because people laugh during the film, and there is something about the mood of the film where people think it's quite, luminous, whereas Eden is always perceived as my most melancholic and sad film. And I find it very ironic but interesting also, that because it shows that the film don't really belong to you, that they escape you. You think you're doing something and you're doing actually something else.
Yes, of course, because but I didn't said because I wouldn't use sad as a word, but yes, melancholical. Yes, I remember just as an autobiographical thing. I wrote the review of that movie, say that the title of my review was "Pioneer of Nostalgia." So it was something that really was, it's something that people looking at the future, but in a way they somehow felt at the past. So it was, I think, what's really strong. I really love Eden because I think that has a really an eye to the future and an eye to the past in the same way. And
Really, it's like a past future. Yeah. Certainly is. And it's also somebody who cannot escape from his own youth, somebody who doesn't want or can't grow up. And that's to a point that it's become almost tragical. I think the film is really about this difficulty of going out of youth, And that relates the film to my other films, because in all of my films you have characters who don't know how to let go, who don't want to turn the page of a love or a vocation, but there's something recurring, I think, in my films, is these characters who are passionately in love with, a person or an activity, a vocation, something, and that they don't want to, they cannot turn the page, Maybe that's what you call nostalgia also.
Yeah, of course. Maybe I know. I don't know. Just what they sell? No, I don't understand. Okay. Well, but Paul in Eden, maybe it's the one that is more, have more difficulties to let it go and follow the flow. In respect of other characters of your movies. So I felt that it was more difficult for him. But as you say, maybe a part of the film is in the eyes of the viewers after you finish it. So
yes.
Anyway, as you said, that trying to make the ends meet for Eden, that it was difficult to produce. You wrote L'Avenir, Things to Come.
Yes.
And in Eden, that what you said, that it was really exciting to work with a lot of young actors. But in Eden, there was some bigger actors that just get inside the story in a more lateral way. With L'Avenir, with Things to Come, you, for the first time, work with one of the biggest actors, not in France but in the world. So it's something that was a little bit. When you were talking before, I think that it could be perceived like something dangerous for your cinema, because what you said that you'd like to work with people with have the same experience as you, just to know something to feel more free. When you see L'Avenir, you really are surprised that how much an actress like Isabelle Huppert dedicated herself to the character and to the movie without overdoing anything. Never. So I want to tell us something about your first experience with a so big actor.
The more the time passes, the more grateful I feel towards Isabelle Huppert, that she was so dedicated and respectful to my film. Of course, it was intimidating for me to work with her. I admire her so much. I had seen her in so many important films that made her, the idea of working with her very intimidating. But then, when I shoot, I think I'm also, when I prepare a film and then when I shoot, I get very, very focused, really focused on, my quest and what I'm looking for. So I guess that must have helped me to overcome this and forget about, how famous she was and her past and all the films she brought with herself, as an actress, all the films that I love. But when I started shooting, I tried to forget about this and really focus on my character and what I was and my own quest. But where I feel so grateful about her is that she was so discreet in her own way. She really understood what I wanted and the simplicity I was looking for, and that I didn't want her experience to bring heaviness to the set or to the character, and she really got that and respected that, and she's so powerful and such a genius, I think, Isabelle Huppert, is also really because she's a chameleon. You know, this animal. Yeah, she's a chameleon. She's able to really adapt herself, I think, to anything. She's able to shoot a film in South Korea with Hong Sang-soo, or, you know, go in the middle of the jungle, you know, or make an American film with America. She can really change, like, I'm sure, like she can really adapt to any situation. You could say, in a way, she's really rock and roll. She's probably the most rock and roll actress ever. I mean, because she's such a star on the one hand, and on the other hand, she's so young in her ability, you know, to adapt all the situation. And we were talking about innocence earlier. I was telling you, like, how much I enjoy filming young people who had this, you know, innocence. And it's funny, actually, because I wouldn't say that about Isabelle. You know, she's so, of course, she's self-aware and she knows what she's doing exactly, etc. But you can still find innocence in her, and that's why I enjoyed so much about her when I filmed her. I will always remember when we arrived at the end of the shoot. We arrived at this place in the country, in the Vercors. It's south of France, very beautiful, where we were shooting all these scenes, you know, in the country. And we were just in the very little village where there was nothing but donkeys and animals and farms, and her joy of arriving there, she was so enthusiastic about being there and being part of this. And she was just among young people, and, you know, and she enjoyed it so much. And I think she still has a child quality, actually, in herself. And I think that's something that's part of why her presence on screen is so strong too.
It's strong and discreet at the same time. That it's something that it's not easy to yeah. And she's a teacher of philosophy. There's something biographical in that too. And so how you constructed that character. And I think that the one thing you said before, something about being maybe in your feelings the most harsh story that you ever seen. I think that there's, in a way, the way that you shoot, the light with which we shoot all the people and, you know, houses and places like this, give a more smooth look and a story that could be maybe feel more harsher, because I think it's a movie that is really mesmerizing to see, and so it maybe comes a little bit down the asperity of the story.
It's true that I'm very sensitive to the locations, and I'm especially sensitive. I mean, I'm sensitive to architecture. I'm sensitive to the beauty of nature, and I think light in that film comes from her and from Isabelle, the actress, but also from the inner strength of the character. But I think it also comes up somehow the beauty of the world, and I don't think it's superficial to say that. I think it's actually philosophical, because it's a character who loses everything. I mean, her husband leaves her for another woman. Her kids, they grow up and they leave the house. She kind of loses a part of her job because she's also an editor. She's getting older, and she thinks that she will never be able to find a new love in her life. So, in terms of sentimentally, she's very lonely. I mean, it's hard. But then there is the summer. There is the beauty of the nature, the beauty of the world, and she's a philosophy teacher, so she knows about that. She knows about, I mean, so the quest for beauty, for meaning, is something in her life that she's already worked on that for a long time as a philosophy teacher. So she gives a lot of importance to these things, you know, and I think it really helps her to cope with, you know, her solitude, her loneliness, and the difficulties of life that I mean, it's good that when you're a philosophy teacher, that you can at least use that in your own personal life when you need it. Because what's the purpose of being a philosophy teacher if it doesn't help you never. You know, when you really need to be helped. And I think the film is really about that. The fact that her job, you know, is not only a job; it's really a vocation. And when she's confronted to the difficulties of her life, she has that job that is something deeper than a job, you know, to really help her find a meaning and move on and not be découragée, not fall into despair, you know. And that's what I admired actually about my mother before I wrote the film, that my mother, she had been confronted to, in one moment of her life, like everything collapsed, like at the same time, you know, everything, all the difficult things happened at the same time in her life for her. And I was impressed on how she was staying, you know, she was okay. She was moving on, and she was keeping on, and she found the meaning to her life from other things that had to do with the moral and intellectual, spiritual quest, I would say. And I wanted to talk about that and to show a woman who's able to, I wouldn't say to be happy again, but at least to, you know, to find a meaning in her life that doesn't come from meeting another man, you know. I think in a more classical story, she could be happy again only because she would meet somebody else. And the particular thing about Things to Come is that at the end of the film, you don't see her meeting another man or falling in love again, but you see something has changed. You think she's going better, that she's strong, she's you know, she's not afraid of living, although she's still lonely. And that I found something that I want to say, because I don't feel like, you know, anybody has said that before, not this way, you know. And it's what makes me really want to make a film, is when I have this feeling that there is something that I would like to say, that not that it's something incredible or like you know, like a scoop or something, but just one feeling about life, or one experience, that one feeling, one thought that I would like to express, that I don't think I have seen in a film said like the way I want to say it. And when I have this feeling that it's, I wouldn't say new, because nothing is new, but you know, that it belongs to me somehow, that really determines me to writing another film.
And I think that all these things that you said are perfectly synthesized by the title of the movie, because at the end of the movie, the character stays lonely, but she thinks she has things to come. So it's something that really is really clear. And talking about your last movie, the last movie that is gone out, because I know you have finished another movie, your sixth movie, you choose to go to follow another character who changes his way of life, and to find something, to find other things to come, to find another place in the world for him. That is Maya. In that movie, you live with the Western society and go to Goa, to India, and something that make a cut more deep, even deeper, for the main character that live all he has behind in France and live all his experience, hard experience as a war correspondent, and go to find another way of living in Goa. And then he finds himself again in a way, you know, in a new way. So I think that is something that you change your location, but you going on your research of characters that go in that direction. So I think that the movie, because some people told me that is a really different movie from the movie you shot before. Maybe I think that there are some difference, but I think that is a complete perfect line from what you came before.
Yes, I think the difference is only a matter of location. I mean, it's set in a different world, in another culture. But if you look at the character of Roman, played by Roman Kolinka, I mean Gabriel, well, first of all, Roman Kolinka has been playing in my two previous films too. I think he was in Things to Come and in Eden, and I think it's not by accident, because I think he has this very strong and melancholic presence. But I think he's an actor who has who is incredibly truth. I mean, in his way of acting, he has this rare quality of being always very simple, very sober, but always true in a way that I'm very sensitive to. But he's also quite melancholic, and is without being aware of that. So first, I would say it's a film related to my previous films. First of all, because there is Roman Kolinka, who has been in my previous films as well, and who has this very strong and particular presence. But also, yes, it's a film about somebody who's looking, as you said, who's looking for a place for him to stay in the world, who is somebody who is lost, and somebody who has lost all his repairs, all his who doesn't know how to live on, you know, and he needs to go very far in order to rebuild himself, and he's going to meet somebody and fall in love with somebody that he cannot really fall in love with because they are too different, because there are too many things separating them. But thanks to this experience and encounter, that is to me even more of a spiritual encounter than a physical encounter, but it's also very essential, of course, but it's both. Thanks to this encounter, he will find a new meaning to his life. So if you look at what the film really is about, I think it's deeply connected to my other films, and all of my films are quests for meaning, and I think this film is as much of that than my previous films. And just that's more anecdotal, but just for you to know, my grandfather was a war reporter, and I never met him because he died before I was born. But I grew up with this myth of my grandfather and his trips, you know, far away, and all, and this difficulty of, you know, really staying at the same place, of having a normal life, this need of moving and of escaping a more conventional life. And so I think that's impressed me, and that's part of why at some point I needed to, or I was inspired to write a film with a character of a war reporter. And one more thing about that film is that I think it's not by accident that I made it after Things to Come. That was a film set in Paris, in a very Parisian world. It was also myself. I needed also to escape of that and make an experience really, really far away, and in a way rebuild myself also. But of course, it's not directly me, of course not. But I mean, there was, you know, when you make a film in India, you actually have to go there a lot and spend months there, which I did, of course. And so for me, making films is about the films you do, but it's also a way of life. So it's not, if I wrote this film in India, it's also because I wanted to actually make the experience of a film in India and confront myself also to the Indian culture.
We are about to finish, and as usual, we have a question at the time from the audience. Christina wants to know personal independence. You can read it. Personal independence and freedom, especially for women, seems a recurrent theme in your films. Is that intentional?
I think independence and freedom has always been a subject in my films. I mean, long before it became fashion to be feminist, because now it seems everybody is a feminist, and I wouldn't define myself like this. But for me, the question of independence, of the desire of being free, and the determination actually of being free intellectually, but in all meanings of that, has always been there. I think from the beginning. I think I was lucky that my two parents were doing the same job. They were both philosophy teachers, so actually I really grew up with an idea of equality and of emancipation of the women that both of my parents transmitted me. So for me, it's not a question that has come like 2 or 3 years ago. It's really something that I grew up, and that was just not even a question, actually, like something that's just part of my life, you know. Like, for instance, I get a lot of questions now about the fact that my films are often with female characters in the center, like as if it would be something you know, political from me, but it's just natural for me because I think I always try to be free, you know, and if I got inspired by female characters, I would just make, you know, a portrait of them. But now it seems like something almost political to make films with women in the center.
Yeah, I don't think you might tell us anything about your next movie, but just something about what brought you to Sweden after India. What brought you to Faro, that is the Bergman Island, that is at the center of the movie. Just the starting point, and then we wait for the movie to come out.
Well, it's a long story, but I guess Bergman brought me to Sweden, obviously, you know. I didn't only go to Sweden, I went to Bergman Island, to Fårö, which is the island where Bergman lived for the 20 last years of his life. You know, my name also is Danish. I have some Scandinavian origins, and I think it was also probably for me a way to I indirectly also reconnect with my own roots.
Yeah. And last thing, just as a curiosity, last thing, you write and direct your movies, so I think you're really peculiar and own ideas of what you want to do with your movies. Which are the first people you talk to and confront to, and if you like to do it or you like to work on your own of as much as you can? And another thing, now you started as a really young film critic. How is your relation with today's cinema? Do you go a lot? You like it a lot? You like it less? You see it?
Well, go a lot. I wish I would, Federico, but the cinemas are closed in France, unfortunately. But when they were still open, yes, I would do a lot. I confess I don't really watch series. I don't even really have a TV at home, so I really rather watch films. And when the cinemas are open, yes, I'm very curious about both films of today and older cinemas, of course. And about your first question, well, I know some directors who like to show their films to the most people possible, you know, once because they need to be reassured, and they like to invite all their friends. And I have a lot of friends like that, you know, actually, like filmmakers who do a lot of screenings and they invite many friends. I'm more like the opposite. I'm very secretive and. Maybe because I'm afraid of showing also, maybe so, but I don't like to confront too many people. I take, of course, advices, but from like, I have one or two people who I'm very close to, and they are the only people I really trust, and I mean that I really rely on in order to talk about my films when they are just finished, you know, because I feel if you take advices from too many different people, then they destroy yourself. So basically, I would rather just listen to one or two people who I really feel confident with.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mia, for this conversation.
Thank you. Sorry if my English was approximative. I hope it was okay for the students to understand what I was saying.
Well, I hope so. For mine, yours was perfect, and I think Germana will come back to say goodbye to everything. I want to thank you again because it was.
Thank you very much for your question and for your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Germana.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Mia. I really appreciated your film, your presence here, of course, and I wanted to tell you that I love the way you don't show us things. I appreciated what you didn't show on the film, the music that you didn't put at the exact point where you would expect it, and I appreciate this kind of work of showing less and giving more reliability, more credits to public, as you told at the start. I just wanted to ask you if you have one advice for our students that they are almost at the beginning, so they are just you can begin to study, and I would love if you could have one advice for someone who wants to start with directing or screenwriting. I know that you hadn't classical path in this, but just something that you feel you would like to say.
Well, it's to try to not lose faith when you get so many critics from so many people, and try to really focus on your own idea and your own way of writing. That don't think that there are rules that you have to apply to write a good script. I think everybody knows how to tell a story, and everybody has a story to tell. Everybody, I really think so. And that you just find your own way to do it. But it's not true that there is only one way to tell good stories, and that if you don't, follow the rules, you will fail. So basically, it's to try to trust yourself. I know it's easier to say than to maybe do, but it's the only thing I can say that I truly believe in.
Very well. So I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Germana.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck.
Thank you, Federico, and the Bergamo Film Meeting for having made possible this meeting. I say goodbye to everyone. Goodbye to the students from Lebanese School and to our students. See you next time. And thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.